having, was it the luxury of being pessimistic? You know,
And you're a real inspiration, sir.
oh, of course, undoubtedly. My father, POW, Nazi prison camp. There was something about that generation, and when we were talking to you before, you were almost, maybe because it's so personal to you. But we now have the ADL led by a younger fellow who's coming from a whole different place in history. God bless him. But there was something about your background as a child survivor who was rescued that I think enabled you to do things and have a perspective that others wouldn't have had.
You're going on very, very dangerous. People say to me, "You survived, so you can do this." That's the height of arrogance. God knows why I survived. I don't know. 1.5 million Jewish children perished for the crime of being Jewish, and I survived. So even when you talk in those terms, well, because you have this thing, and therefore you can. I don't know. I don't know. That's.
But it certainly helped, for instance, with you forging Jewish-Catholic relations. When my mom was growing up, she would get beaten up by the Catholic kids in Brooklyn and have her bicycle stolen, and others would say, "Well, you're a white Jew."
But I would do it regardless, because what they did was so dramatic, so historic. So I don't think it would. It's in the.
You don't think your narrative doesn't matter?
I don't. Who knows? Like, people say to me, "Well, that's why, because of this, you went to the ADL and became director." And I said, "Okay, why do people become proctologists?" I don't know, and it would be arrogance to believe that I survived so I can do this, or I survived therefore I do this. I don't want to go there, because what you're talking about, maybe I have a smidgen of credibility because I can talk from a personal, and people want to feel that they can connect. People like stories, and they like nice stories. So yeah, I have a story. It's a tragic, beautiful story. It's a woman who risked her life to save me. Okay, but
A Catholic.
Yep. But it was, it wasn't all beautiful. I was in a custody battle. She didn't want to give me up. Why? Because I was cute, maybe. Okay, I was kidnapped. My parents kidnapped me back. So there's a lot of beauty in this story, but there's a lot of tragedy. I never said goodbye to her. I never embraced her and said thank you to her. Okay, so in a way you can say, so maybe what I'm doing is in a way saying thank you to all. I don't know, maybe, but that's all apocrypha.
We lost Shimon Peres this year, and one of the things that he said was he had really hoped for peace between the Israelis and Palestinians.
I'm an optimist.
So
he was an optimist.
Do you still believe that we will see an Israeli and Palestinian state living side by side in peace?
Believe, yeah. And you know what? We're in a period right after the fires. The fires, tragic in Israel. There's half of them arson, and yet Israelis and Palestinians, or Israeli Arabs, came together to fight the fires, and now Palestinians are providing wood and materials to rebuild the homes. So, I continue to be optimistic. We don't have the best Myers and courageous leadership to stand up and say, let's try this, let's try that. But yeah, I believe we'll, if not in my lifetime, my children's lifetime, there'll be peace.
And when you met with
maybe Trump can do it.
When you met with Palestinian leaders, though, you also felt that.
Yes. We argued. We argued, but yeah.
But you felt that there was mutual respect and a desire on both sides for
Listen,
peace.
I have better relationships privately and quietly with all kinds of Arab Muslim leaders, all the way up. And the point is, at what point will they go public? So that's the moment of courage.
Do you think the threat from religious extremists like Daesh, ISIS,
The
Al Qaeda
intimidation
has made it
Yes.
easier for Israelis and Arabs to make peace, or at
Well,
least
it
the
works-
Palestinians?
It works, yeah. Well, they have more common interests today. That is, radical Islam threatens moderate Arabs all over the. But I don't think it's enough because it's also threatening. It works both ways. So yes, today, those who are opposed to extremist Islam, to Daesh and ISIS, sure, they have something in common. If they're opposed to Iran, they have something in common. But at the same time, they're afraid that they will be killed, be assassinated, or whatever. So it works both ways. And we hope that the common interest can become so great that it gives them the courage to say, okay, look, the history is not a good one. King Abdullah was murdered because he met with Golda Meir. Yitzhak Rabin was murdered because he tried to move. So it's
But you think there's a critical mass? This is because people respect your opinion and your years of doing this. You
yeah,
think
I am,
in your
I am
heart
optimistic,
that
yes.
that an Israeli state, a Palestinian state living side by side
Yes.
in peace is something that will happen in your kid's lifetime.
Yes. Yes. Not the way we exactly see it now. Okay, it has to be a normal state. You can't have an abnormal state.
You say an abnormal state. Which one are you talking about?
Palestinian. That means you can't have a state where they can only fly their planes this way and not this way. You have tunnels, but there are answers. But I think what we're talking about, the two-state solution, is unnatural. Truncated sovereignty doesn't exist anywhere in the world successfully. So we have to figure out a way where you have two states, sovereign states that respect each other and trust each other. It'll take time, but I believe it could happen. And again, I say to you, here is a tragedy, this fire. And because of the proximity of the danger that they both faced, they came together and they did things nobody thought they could do together. Okay? Fight the fire together. And fight where? In Jewish homes. And the Prime Minister of Israel called Abu Mazen for the first time in 2 years to say thank you. To say thank you.
You're working on a museum in New York related to the Holocaust, or anti-Semitism rather, and not the Holocaust specifically. Tell us why you're doing that.
There are 50 museums in the world dedicated to the Holocaust. And I think the further away we move from the Holocaust as a single event in history is less and less relevant to our current and future generations. They don't understand. This was a war between Germans and Jews. What relevance does it have to them? And I know, and as you know, Hitler would not have succeeded had there not been a preconditioned history of anti-Semitism. Somebody once wrote, and I remember as a youngster reading it, so I never wrote down who it was that said it. So I read this introduction in a book on Nazism, on Hitler. And it said, first came the leaders of the world, of Europe primarily, and said to the Jews, you cannot live amongst us as Jews. You have to convert. Those were the Christian leaders who said to the Jews of Europe, starting Spain and Portugal, you cannot live amongst us as Jews, convert. 100 years later, 200 years later, in York and the UK and in other places in Europe, they shortened that phrase and said, you cannot live amongst us. And you had expulsions of Jews from countries. Then came Hitler and shortened that phrase and said, you cannot live. If you did not have a history of predisposition, of saying that Jews cannot be Jews or cannot live amongst us, Hitler could not have succeeded. And to me, that's why we need a museum to explain. And more so, anti-Semitism is the mother of all prejudices. It has survived all kinds of isms. Fascism, communism, Nazism, so everywhere. It has survived secular states and religious states. It has survived in all kinds of cultures because it is the essence of prejudice, which is segregating or hating or distant from the other. You're not like we are. And in all these places, Jews were not like the majority. And therefore, they were the scapegoat. They were the cause. I mean, politically, they were used. You name it. So yeah, I believe if we understand the history of anti-Semitism, we'll understand the history of prejudice. And we will then be able to communicate that we are all susceptible. Listen, in this country, the majority is going to become a minority. Hello? Hello? What is prejudice about? Prejudice is practiced by the majority against the minority. It's whatever the other is. The whites in this country in 25, 40 years are going to become the other. And if we don't conquer this illness, this disease, we're all in trouble. So hopefully by then we'll have a museum. Hopefully it'll be more understanding. And my grandchildren will benefit from it.
And you were afraid about Jews in Europe at this point.
Oh yes, because there it's imminent. There it's, they're killing people.
So it's
because
different
of
by
who they are.
It's different by definition rather than
radical
degree.
Islam today is the great threat, not only to democracy but to Jews. It's the greatest threat.
Well, and to other Muslims as well.
Yeah, but okay, I'm saying fine, but Jews are also at the top of their. First, they're Muslims who reject them, and but yeah, it's real and present in Europe, and my response is I don't think they've come to grips with the challenge, and therefore I'm afraid for democracy. And you know what? Take a look with me. We're waiting to see what happens in France. We're waiting to see what's happening in Italy. You look at Greece. You look at Hungary. Take a look. Now that's a response to radical Islam, but it's the wrong response. That's not how you're going to defeat them. That's how you're going to defeat democracy, and then all freedoms go.
I got a fun last question. Gabriel is getting bar mitzvah this year, or next year rather. What would you have as a message to someone like Gabriel who's getting bar mitzvah this year as a young Jewish boy who's civically involved?
Enjoy the present, the party, the love, the heritage, the history. He's got time to fight and worry about what you and I are worried about. He's got plenty of time. I just had a bat mitzvah of our granddaughter.
Can you say happy bar mitzvah, Gabriel Levin?
You'll impress his dad at least.
Mazel tov. Happy bar mitzvah, Gabriel. Enjoy.
Thank you so much, Abe Foxman, for speaking with us today. Thank you.
I just missed them.